Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film, and we're getting all romancy here on this Spielberg episode. And I'm joined by my frequent collaborator and fellow SiftPop writer, Foster. Foster, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, as always.
I feel like,
as always,
I'll say this as always. You and Rowan, real MVPs here.
Yeah. Theme of the episode too with the movie we're watching.
I feel like we're gonna wind up coming down and messaging you two when Kingdom of the Crystal Skull rolls around.
Oh, that's okay. You can give that to Rowan.
Rowan hasn't seen any Indiana Jones movies.
Oh, okay.
And he said he if I really need him and give him up time, he'll watch all four of them. And then I'm like, well, please watch the other ones first. Don't do Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But every other Spielberg movie has actually been taken. And this was one of my last ones because I've never heard of Always, and I wondered why. And we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But for those who haven't tuned into the show before, we have 3 segments. We have coming attractions for the weekend this episode releases. We have our main feature and some recommendations for you. And for coming attractions, July 29th, the big movie is DC League of Super Pets. I don't know if anybody above the age of like 8 is excited for this movie or not, but it does have The Rock and Kevin Hart in it. And the only thing I'm excited about is Keanu Reeves' Batman. But, that's neither of our picks. But Foster, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, this isn't like the most stacked week for me, but the one that stood out was 13 Lives, it's a new Ron Howard movie. So that's always a big deal. And then I think Colin Farrell and Viggo Mortensen are the 2 leads. And Viggo's doing an accent too. I always love hearing actors do accents, especially when it's an American actor. I think he's trying to do a British accent. It's been a while since I saw the trailer, but yeah, this is about the soccer team that was in the cave. I didn't see the documentary. I think I'm gonna hold off on watching it until I see the movie, because I feel like if I watch the documentary this week and then see the movie won't be as good. But yeah, if I watch the movie then the documentary, I can enjoy both.
That was a whole 2+ hour documentary too. And it felt cinematic. So I saw that in the theater. I'm like, okay, this is like a documentary where I'm like, I could understand going out of your way to see this in a theater. Because it's a rescue mission.
Yeah.
But I watched the documentary and then I heard this movie was coming out. And it is coming out in theaters this weekend, but also on Amazon the following week. I'll see how my weekend goes to see if I actually get to catch it in the theater, but there's some big names in this movie. And, we have Ron Howard, who is one of the most reliable directors that you have in Hollywood. So if he puts a great foot forward, with Apollo 13 or something like that, this would be a pretty good movie. I'm excited for it. Yeah. My top pick, which I have seen, but I won't really talk about it, is Vengeance. And I remember seeing the trailer for Vengeance from star, writer, and director BJ Novak of The Office, aka Ryan Howard. And he is it's very much a coastal, quote unquote, coastal elite versus American heartland kind of story, where he's a journalist who had been sleeping around with this young woman from Texas, and she winds up dead, and he gets guilted into going to her funeral. And then when her brother, played by Boyd Holbrook, thinks that she was murdered, he decides to make a whole entire podcast series about it. Because, content today, you could even make things based off of a murder podcast and get tons of people to watch it. Just look at Only Murders in the Building. This is a fish out of water crime mystery comedy, and it had a lot of elements. I laughed a decent amount watching the trailer. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty excited for this. Yeah. And I could at least say I think this is a good effort from BJ Novak and definitely worth checking out. So
he wrote and directed it.
This is his first feature film that he's directed, and he stars in it. And he doesn't do a whole lot of like starring performances and things. So I thought that was going to be interesting. And like he's sarcastic, he's dry, he's doing his BJ Novak thing. And honestly, Boyd Holbrook was great in this. I feel like I gave him tons of crap when I first saw Logan. And I'm like, the villains could have been better in this movie. This dude's just doing a Val Kilmer impression from Tombstone. But like he's actually really charismatic in this. And like Ashton Kutcher's in it in an interesting role. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. And I think it has a good cast and everything. So definitely worth checking out though. But we'll see how it does in the shadow of a bunch of big name voice actors and DC pets. So it'll be an interesting weekend. And
I don't think there's a lot of overlap between those two audiences. I think it's okay.
Well, we'll have to see if people go out to see Vengeance when you have Nope still out and Top Gun.
I'm gonna see it. I think I'm seeing that in 13 Lives on Friday. I think is what I'm doing.
Very nice. I'm probably gonna see League of Super Pets on Friday. Because I'm pretty sure my wife doesn't want to go see it. So I'm just like, well, I'm off Friday. I'll get that out of the way. But we're here to talk about Steven Spielberg's 1989 fantasy romance, Always, which, let's paint a bit of a picture here. This is a story about a pilot who fights fires, played by Richard Dreyfuss, which this is his third collaboration with Steven Spielberg after Jaws and Close Encounters, but like 14 years later after Jaws, so now he's a little gruffer and got a mustache. And his best friend Al's played by John Goodman, who's also a pilot, and his love interest is Holly Hunter, so hot right now in the late 80s into the early 90s. She was a big female lead then. And unfortunately, our protagonist, Peter, winds up dying, and he winds up coming back as a ghost and trying to inspire another young pilot who also seems to be falling in love with his the love interest, Holly Hunter, just like, that's interesting. And this is basically a remake of
A guy named
Joe, which I looked into it. So apparently on the set of Jaws, Spielberg and Dreyfuss bonded over how much they loved that film. And they were like, we need to remake this. It only took 14 years, but they got around to it. And apparently it was a war film. And this time they shifted into like Pacific Northwest fighting fires kind of pilots and not like war pilots. But Foster, so besides me being like, hey, Foster, come on for this episode, what kind of interests you in wanting to check this one out?
This movie specifically, not a whole lot of interest, but just in general, I always like just checking another movie off the watch list. So that's why I wanted to do this one, because I'd never seen it before. And I like Richard Dreyfuss, Steven Spielberg. I think he's probably the greatest director of all time. I mean, I don't know who else I would put under that title. Yeah, I knew nothing about the plot though.
Yeah, I didn't look up anything going into this movie. I happened to get this new like Blu-ray set of Spielberg films, and this happened to be in it. And I open it, and it's like Richard Dreyfuss with like a heavenly glow around him. I'm like, is he a ghost?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he is. Indeed.
Yeah.
So like this film's in the same vein of like Heaven Can Wait or Ghost.
Yeah, I was thinking of Ghost.
Yeah, because it's not there's obviously much more ghost stories that are horror films, because ghosts would be terrifying to find out that they exist. But you have those kinds of comedies and dramas that utilize like somebody sticking around past their time. But Foster, what are some of your general thoughts? What stuck out to you about the film?
Well, just going off what you were saying, I was thinking of a whole lot of other movies while watching this, and I'm thinking right around this time there was like Ghost was the next year in 1990, and then Beetlejuice was the year before in 88, and it's just a whole lot of someone dies and then they're sort of interacting with the living. So I thought that was interesting. I'll say I like both of those two movies more than Always. Um, I I don't know. I thought this was kind of a weird movie, to be honest with you. It I was into it enough for like the first like third to half, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. We'll see where this is going. But just as it went on, it was just kind of a baffling movie. And I feel like with this premise, you can do so much. And I don't know. I felt like there wasn't necessarily a huge driving force or motivation. Like in Beetlejuice, I was thinking, what's the motivation there? They want to kick the family out of the house,
Yeah.
right? And they're also connecting with Winona Ryder's character. And then in Ghost, he's murdered, right? So he's trying to
Yeah,
figure
it's a
out
murder
who
mystery.
murdered. Yeah. So there's like a real great driving force. But in this one, it was just kind of like, you know, somewhere in the middle of the movie, I'm just watching. I'm like, what is the point of this?
Well, and I think they make a choice narratively to be like, the mystery is he isn't sure why he's back. And but they never give you enough of a reason to be intrigued exactly why he's back.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. And like, let's kind of start with like that first third of the film, which like I was digging this movie a
Yeah.
lot,
Yeah.
honestly, and it really was the chemistry of the three main actors in the film
Yes.
because one, Richard Dreyfuss, and it made me sad, honestly, to think about that all he's relegated to now is just like stupid VOD movies
Mhm.
that he'll get no recognition for because he's an extremely charismatic actor and he has great comedic timing. And like he shows that not as much in Jaws. He does get to be sarcastic and he's that character.
Yeah.
But like Close Encounters, the way he interacts with kids is hilarious.
Yeah.
And then with this, he's just throwing barbs at people, just the way he reacts to things. Holly Hunter is like, this is peak Holly Hunter,
Yeah.
like broadcast news, Raising Arizona Holly Hunter around this time. And she's just so charming and like that moment earlier in the film where he gets her that dress and then she comes out and
Oh, it's great.
I'm just like because like she's very attractive and then just her personality just makes it that much better and they have the whole entire you know what I'm thinking about it now, they basically played off like felt like Snow White with all like the workers. They're like, you can't touch this until you go wash your hands. And then all these grown men start running out to go wash their hands so that they can dance with her.
That was a little weird after that nice moment, but yeah,
it felt silly. And like this was feeling like a silly rom-com, like the first third of it, except when they were fighting fires. And like John Goodman I love John Goodman so much, and he's just a presence. Well, he's just a presence anytime he steps on the screen, and he's funny and he gets some moments to shine here. But like, I was enjoying this for the first act of this film a lot.
Yeah, she's also really good in the scene where she's begging Richard Dreyfuss to not stay to take the other job, the one that's going to be less dangerous. Yeah, I was thinking as I was watching this, do you think Steven Spielberg watched Raising Arizona 2 years ago and was like, ooh, Holly Hunter, John Goodman? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everyone's good in this movie. It's I didn't love it, but it's kind of hard to hate because it is so sweet, and also because Steven Spielberg is so great. Like no matter what's happening, it's always really well shot too, and the lighting is incredible. So like I guess then transitioning to once he dies, what I thought was really really cool is the way they lit his character in contrast to the other people. So he'd be like positioned behind them in the frame, but clearly there was different lights shining on them. So he'd be like kind of a duller bluer light, and it kind of separates him from the rest of the characters, even though they're in the same space. It was really cool. And then towards the end of the movie, when he has a moment with Holly Hunter, their lighting is uniform, and I thought that was really really cool. And then of course at the end of the movie when they sort of separate and she moves on, and then he's back into the separated lighting. But like the point I'm making is just the whole movie is really well shot. Even the opening shot too, like with the plane that's coming down behind the boat, that's really great. It's Steven Spielberg, and you can see it, I think, throughout the whole movie. Like I like everything about this movie except the story, basically.
it really does lose its way. And there was obviously when he dies, like that whole sequence, the flight sequences are intense, the way they incorporate the fire,
Mhm.
the part where like he saves his best friend's life and winds up costing him, and just the acting in that scene with Richard Dreyfuss, like when he looks over his shoulder and
Yeah,
we see that fire and he turns back to like, and he's trying to keep a
that was so
smile
good.
on
Yeah.
for John Goodman. Like I teared up, honestly. I got a bit emotional, and then John Goodman's reaction after that plane explodes and just like hit like, and then the scene right after when he walks into the office and you just see Holly Hunter, you don't have to hear any of it, just her through the window and her reaction to it. And then we get something completely different. And like I thought it was very interesting contrast in that first sequence when he wakes up in the woods, because the woods are burnt to a crisp. This
Mm.
is the life he left, and it's in such stark contrast to the life he has now, which is this ethereal thing. And he finds just like this little green patch there, and Audrey Hepburn pops up, which that was such an interesting bit of casting. And
Mhm.
I feel like Steven Spielberg, like you could tell he has like random cameos and stuff. It's funny, I double dipped this weekend. I did my Hook episode too, and Hook's just filled with the most ridiculous cameos you
Yeah.
could possibly find. And Audrey Hepburn is just glowing. Honestly, I feel like that's why he probably cast her. She just has that personality,
Mhm.
and like her role of Hap is just like exposition dump, and like this is your life now, but we're going to be like, you need to inspire somebody, but we're not going to tell you anything else.
Mm.
And then just aimlessly go until we finally find out in the last 10 minutes on like what he's supposed to be inspiring for.
Yeah.
Um, my biggest issue with the second half of the film is, not gonna lie, I felt like, what's his name, Ted.
Yeah.
It just kind of felt like he was a wet noodle. I'm like, I didn't like, I didn't find him very interesting, and like the whole silly slapstick thing with the oil he did when he meets John Goodman's character.
Yeah.
I'm like, is everyone an idiot in this scene? I'm just like, and then Marge Halgenberger from like CSI is just like doe-eyed, like at him, and he's completely dense. And then you get like Keith David cameo.
Mhm.
This is one of the other pilots, but like I didn't buy this new romance between Holly Hunter and I think it's Brad Johnson is who plays Ted. I'm just like, I don't want you together. I'm with Peter over here. I want them back together. That's the whole entire thing. What it's like, that's the hook of the film, is like you care about the two of them, and then you and Peter are just supposed to sit back and watch this new romance happen, and none of us are happy.
Mhm.
I felt like it was so weird.
Yeah. I might just be forgetting also, but I felt like Richard Dreyfuss should have been a bit more resistant to this, to the fact that he was dead, and that Audrey Hepburn is appearing to him as God, basically in the middle of the woods in a white sweater. like, I don't know. I'm it right now in my memory. I can't remember him like being overly weirded out.
I think he's like, did I go crazy or am I dead? And she's like cutting his hair, and it's like, you're not crazy. And then he has that realization of like, I'm dead. Oh.
Mhm.
And like that's weird. And like you're right, I didn't really think about that, but like he just kind of like slowly, honestly, he for the most part just kind of takes in everything with a lot more just like, well, there's no resistance here. He's not even like freaking out that much that like the love of his life is now with this other dude who he's trying to turn in. He's basically grooming this other guy to be him.
Mhm.
And I'm like, this is a weird choice. Like I feel like this movie would have worked better if it was just him with Al and with like John Goodman and Holly Hunter, and then dealing with their grief. Because there's one particular scene John Goodman lashes out with how he's dealing with his grief.
Huh?
And I thought that was pretty powerful. And I did like the finale in terms of like his connection with Holly Hunter when she's flying that plane.
Yeah.
Like that really worked. And I'm like,
Yeah, the finale is really good. The last 10 minutes, especially the conversation between them.
Mhm.
Well, between them, I guess.
And I'm just like, I wonder why I enjoyed this more than the other stuff in the second half. Oh yeah, because I actually cared about these characters. I just feel like Ted might become one of the most useless characters I've seen in a movie. I'm just like, I don't care that you're here. I don't care what you're doing. And like the whole Thanksgiving thing, like her faking that she made dinner was funny and like very Holly Hunter kind of quirky, but like, I don't care about them eating dinner. The second Ted walks out and they have Peter and like Richard Dreyfuss and Holly Hunter have that dance, I'm like, that meant something. And it's just like, I feel like this movie made a decision to try to make this one character happen for a big chunk of the second half of the film, and just don't stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not happening. But overall, like I've been ranking my Spielberg films, and like this is interesting that this weekend I watched both Always and Hook, and it's kind of like Always was one I had never seen, and then I'm just like, this is probably why. I feel like this is why not most people don't talk about this, because this definitely isn't one of his stronger outings. And when you're surrounded by Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and then Jurassic Park and Schindler's List come out a couple years after this, kind of like no wonder people don't talk about this. And then I feel like a lot of people love Hook for nostalgia purposes, and then other people are like, what the hell is this movie? And at least people talk about it. Always is just like the forgotten movie of Spielberg's past. But yeah. I guess, Foster, do you have anything else to add?
I mean, I wrote some notes. John Goodman was really, really munching on that chicken when he dumped it into his beer. That first part of the movie. That's my first note.
I thought that was that felt like such a like John Goodman is very much that character, and he's just like, yep, I'm gonna dip my chicken in my beer because I'm that guy.
Yeah, and then also just more broadly, I guess, even though I didn't love the movie, I think I like that this kind of movie exists, and I wish we had more of it. And what I mean by this kind of movie, I really like, first of all, just adult dramas, honestly. I feel like we don't get a ton of those unless it's like based on a book or it's a biopic or something like that.
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of classic movies. I'm going to recommend one later, but like I just watched The Sting and I'm like, where's this kind of movie? Like I'd love more of that.
It's like that kind of morphed into like Ocean's movies.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's Soderbergh. I feel like you have to seek out certain filmmakers to get certain films nowadays, when it's just like, this kind of thing. I feel like everything's just a cliched, crappy romance. And like, at least this does something different with it. This has action in it.
And I also really like, I really love adult movies where there's just sort of subtle, either supernatural or sci-fi elements where it's like, it's not really the main point of the movie. It's just like a tool for the plot. So like Eternal Sunshine is a great example. Or Ghost is another example.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say recently I was thinking of The Black Phone, and I really liked The Black Phone. I know not everyone loved it, but like I love that it's just like kind of quietly supernatural, and that you don't need to explain it, but it adds to the plot and you get to do some cool things that you wouldn't ordinarily. I just love that kind of thing, and I would love more movies like that where you can just have an adult drama and sure, you can have ghosts or whatever you want.
Well, and I just watched this new film, We Are Living Things, and not to get too much into it because it's still embargoed, but like it's like honestly it's a love story, but the two people connect because one's mother was abducted by aliens and the other one was abducted by aliens when she was a
Mhm.
child. And it's just like them coming together trying to make contact again.
Mm.
And it's just like, but when it really comes down to it, it's about the human connection between these two, and they're both immigrants. So
Mhm.
like aliens on layers.
Yeah.
And it leans into those kinds of things, but like the science fiction elements are not the like out front
Yeah.
elements of it. It's just kind of there as foundation.
Yeah, my mind's going way back to, I don't know why he popped into my head, but Kurosawa had like a lot of those. Like if you think of Rashomon, there's that one scene. I can't even describe it. I think you know what I'm talking about, where they're trying to like have the woman who's communing with. It's been a couple years since I've seen it. There's supernatural elements, or like Throne of Blood, which is Macbeth, because it's like the witches. So like going back forever, we've had these sort of supernatural elements, and I don't know, it's just fun. It spices things up. And I feel like it opens up a whole world. Like there's no limit to what you can do. So
yeah, like a ghost story doesn't just have to be like scary. Like you could use that for interesting ways, and
like A Ghost Story, that movie too,
yeah, which
example.
is, and you know, like A Sixth Sense, which honestly tricks you into really thinking that this is a horror film, but it's really not. And what it really turns out to be, it has so much more emotional heft to it.
Yeah, and what I love is when I don't know if you know, that's like I think my second favorite movie of all time, Sixth Sense.
Well, if the Sham Hammer ever gets picked for this, I'll make sure to put you down for the Sixth Sense.
Oh boy, put me for any of them. I mean, maybe not any of them. I shouldn't. Now that I'm no, I went through and I watched like all the bad ones too last year before Old came out, because I was like, if I'm gonna defend this man, I need to see him at his worst.
Yeah. After Earth.
Yeah, honestly, After Earth, this, especially after you watch The Happening and The Last Airbender, it's not anywhere near as bad as those two. And there's like things to appreciate. It's just really, really boring. and you're sitting there and you're like, are they trying to do an accent? I can't tell.
I think the thing is, it's either, do you want to be entertained and laugh at a movie? Because I feel like you do that at the other two.
That's a great point.
Or you just sit through, this is an extremely boring movie that does nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah. With The Sixth Sense, what I love so much is that the supernatural element really serves the movie's themes, and it all sort of comes together in the car ride with Haley Joel Osment and Toni Collette at the end. It's so good. And so like, I love that. Go ahead.
The final moments in The Sixth Sense have a similar vibe to some of the moments in this film, and like you could tell, obviously a lot of people compare Shyamalan to Hitchcock. Everyone's like, he's the next Hitchcock. But like, I feel like you could feel a little Spielberg in there. And, you know, Jordan Peele's pulling in a little bit of Spielberg now too, with Nope, which is very mid to late 70s Steven Spielberg. But it's like that kind of thing where it's just like, there's an emotional resonance here. And, you know, John Williams helps a lot. With a lot of those things, and like with Shyamalan, I feel like James Newton Howard.
Oh yes, to me that's like the perfect director composer collaboration. Like those scores are so good. The James Newton Howard.
If the movies aren't, like the score for The Last Airbenders, even just like, holy crap.
Yeah, I love the Lady in the Water score. I think the best one for me, honestly, is The Village. That score is so good. That's the one where I listen to it like cover to cover, the whole thing. Yeah.
So even like, this is a flawed movie, and here's the thing: you're comparing this to Steven Spielberg. So like, even like Steven Spielberg's 15th best movie is better than most movies that most people have ever made. So it's like, it's a hard comparison, but I think always has some great things going for it. And like, I looked up on Rotten Tomatoes, has like a 65%. You know, Rotten Tomatoes isn't everything, but like, I'm like watching this movie for the first half, and I'm like, why is this not like more beloved? And then it kind of spirals. I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
I see why this might not be beloved by many.
Yeah,
But
Ted.
But now we have some films that we do want to talk to all of you about, which are some recommendations. So, Foster, what would you like to recommend to the audience here?
All right, I'm taking a note from you. I'm gonna do an oldie and a new one. So my old movie, because I'm always just trying to check more movies off the watch list. I watched Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and I thought it was great. It's Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor. It's really. Have you seen this?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really just four people for the
Mhm.
majority of the movie. I think all four of them were nominated. I know Elizabeth Taylor won, and I think
Richard Burton never won. He got
no,
nominated like 8
yeah,
times.
he lost to Paul Schofield for A Man for All Seasons, which I have seen that too. And I would have given it to Rick. You know, we're close. We can call each other by
Yeah,
our.
it's an interesting comparison because I really do love that film too. But
Mhm.
like this is like acting.
Yeah, and
Like
it's
this whole
so
movie's acting.
it's
Like
so good.
there's nothing else to go along. Like it's all about the performances.
Yeah, and I loved Richard Burton in this. He's still sort of new to me. I've seen a couple now. I'm kind of knocking off a lot of 60s and 70s movies right now. That's what I've been doing the past
Mhm.
few weeks. And I think Richard Burton is the one that stood out the most to me because Elizabeth Taylor's fantastic, but it is like the more showy one, and
Yeah.
I don't know that the kind of acting he's doing, I just gravitate towards more a little bit, I guess. I think the supporting actress might have won. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, it was just great. It plays out like a play. I can't remember if it was a play first, but I know it's definitely been a play since.
Um, I think it was because like
Yes, I think it was.
so
It was.
I'm gonna shamelessly plug another podcast on here, which is the Cinephiles podcast
Okay.
from Steve Morris and John Roca. I knew John Roca from like Collider Movie Talk and stuff like that, and like the Schmodown.
Yeah.
And like I follow him, and him and Steve Morris do a podcast where honestly the inspiration for this show was that.
Mm.
Not gonna lie, I kind of like ran with it, but like they did this film on one of their episodes, and you know, who the hell's the director? He was a stage person. This was one of his first
Mike
films.
Nichols.
Mike Nichols, yeah,
Yeah, this was his first movie.
yep. Which he started on stage, and this was a
Yeah.
great transition for him.
Hmm.
Because like he's made some amazing films over the years, and it's like something else.
Yeah, I'm just double checking to make sure it really is his first, but that's an insane, insane debut. That's got to be like one of the best debuts of all time. So it has this. I love movies where you watch and you think to yourself, this could be a play or this was probably a play because they have just this real great like self-contained energy where you feel everything's about to bubble over before the end, and then the ending of this movie is great too because it just had once you hit the peak, then it just has this sort of weird peace and calm in the last 10 minutes. It's like really eerie and it's just so well done, I thought. And it is really well directed. And it's shot interestingly. It's in black and white, but it's pretty striking. And it's like a lot of monologues, but great monologues where you're like pulled in closer to the screen, I guess.
This was indeed his first film, and then he followed up the next year with The Graduate. So he was on a roll.
Yeah. So this is just a great one that I would recommend for people just going through and knocking off the classics. This is one I was a little worried about. I was like, this is going to be some like stuffy thing that my grandparents would love, but no, it was really great. It was like, it felt pretty modern too. It was also really uncomfortable and tense and stressful and awkward, just the interactions between them all. There's a lot of tension in that marriage.
Thematically, and some of the ideas it takes on,
Yeah.
they're touchy for like a 60s movie. Like you could tell this was, along with The Graduate, like early counterculture kind of filmmaking and storytelling, because like they tackle some like not kosher things that you're like most people at that time would be comfortable like sitting and having conversations about. Like there's some really uncomfortable marital problems. in
Hmm.
this movie. And what's
Hmm.
crazy is they were married in real life at least once or twice or whatever. They kept getting back together, Richard Burton and Elizabeth
Yeah.
Taylor. But yeah, Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole are those two where everybody is like, get Leo his Oscar. I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
he's like 40 something. Go tell that to Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole, who acted like decades upon decades upon decades and had like 8 and 9 nominations and still never won.
Yeah. So like for me, as I go through these movies, the best feeling in the world is when I've not seen a lot of movies from a certain actor like Richard Burton, and then I watch movies with him and I'm like, I get it. It's just the best feeling. It's so great and so validating. And it's like you every time you enter a classic movie, there's always that little fear, like, what if I hate it? What if I don't get it? Which sometimes happens, and that's the worst feeling. But yeah, sometimes it works out.
Yeah. I feel like and his last film I think was 1984, which was
That's
interesting.
his last movie.
Yeah, because he died younger than a lot
Yes.
of
Yeah.
people. Like that alcoholism. Uh,
Mm.
drank a lot. But Foster, what was your newer movie you wanted to recommend?
My newer movie is a documentary called Fire of Love, and that is a documentary about two volcanologists, Katya and Maurice Croft. They went and filmed volcanoes. Their big contribution, like their long lasting, like what they added to the world of volcanoes, is just the amount of footage they left behind, and also the amount of like warning signs that they were able to give people as far as dangerous volcanoes. So yeah, like the documentary does, there's a little portion of it that talks about how people weren't listening to their warnings at first, and there are of course dangerous consequences because they're volcanoes.
Yep.
Now it seems obvious, but then now because of their contributions and their impact, we know a lot more about volcanoes because of the warning signs that they discovered and because of the insane amount of footage. So there's like hundreds of hours of footage they have, and when you watch this documentary, this is the most visually striking documentary I've ever seen, and it's not even close because I don't even have a number two in my head right now. It is incredible the amount of footage they get, and so it was mostly filmed by the husband, Maurice. In the documentary, he talks about, he's like, oh yeah, I'm not really a filmmaker. But then you watch this documentary and you're like, the results suggest otherwise, sir. You know, this looks incredible. And he does cool things where he does these slow dramatic zoom outs, you know, so he'll show a person up close and then he'll zoom out really dramatically and then you'll see a huge volcano behind them. There's like thought put into it. Apparently the documentary talks about he did multiple takes of a couple shots just to get the right one, you know, to just get the right moment of the volcano, and it's so cool.
But
And
he wasn't a filmmaker.
say that again.
But he wasn't a filmmaker.
No. But like this couple, they're dorky, they're fun, they really love volcanoes, and they just love going up to them, and they get so close, and you're like, buddy, step back a little bit, please. And I mean, the documentary says within the first minute they both die in a volcano. Like they're doing what they love, and they knew that this was going to happen too. They're like, it's gonna happen eventually. I'd rather like live in the moment doing what I love, which is volcanoes. But like as a couple, they make for a really great pair of leads too, because their interview footage is dorky, it's really endearing, and you can't help but like them. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, like, you get that from the trailer too, which the trailer sold me so hard on this.
Such a good trailer. Yes.
I'm just like, I need to see this movie, and I might be walking on the surface of a volcano to go check this out today.
Okay.
It's 100 degrees out.
Yeah, you're getting the 4D experience.
Yep.
It's exactly like the trailer. I loved the trailer too. That's what made me want to watch it. It's exactly like the trailer. It's also not too long. I think it's like 90 minutes or so. So it's just perfect. It's not like too long. Also, importantly, it's not really a nature documentary. This is not Planet Earth. This is like a very artfully presented. It's narrated by Miranda July, who has this like, either you get into it or it really annoys you. I was into it, but her narration is unique. I'll just say that. And it's like super like poetic, and you know, they compare their love to the fire of the volcano, hence the title. But it's just a unique documentary. It's not really about giving you information or giving you like a play-by-play of events, even though it is pretty chronological, but it's more of like a like you're just in awe at the footage and what they're doing. And it's just great. It's a great experience. It's yeah, it could be really heavy, but it's not too heavy. It's just, I don't know. I can't recommend it enough. I think it's like a perfect documentary, and I feel like anyone in the world could watch this and like it.
Makes me even
Yeah.
more excited.
Yeah, I would really.
Because like I'm on the fence about actually venturing out to go see this today, and driving like the 25 to 30 minutes to get into Philly and then find a spot and then walk to the theater and actually check this out. But I'm more tempted. At least it'll be cold in the theater.
Yeah, you definitely won't be disappointed if you see it. It's just so good. Yeah.
Now, my two recommendations, one is a film that I got to check out, which is called Ali and Ava. And this is a very mundane kind of subtler romance between two people. Ali, who's in an estranged marriage. He hasn't really let it out to a whole lot of people or his family, but like him and his wife are still living in the same house, but they're not really together. And Ava has some baggage in terms of like her husband and the kind of person he was. This takes place in England. And there's also some prejudices that bleed through with some of the characters, because like Ali is a Muslim and Ava is a Christian white woman. There's tensions between, like, you could definitely tell that some people in Ava's family are not very open to foreigners, and there's a lot of tension with that. But like just the charm and the chemistry between the two actors in this film is off the charts, and like it really grabbed me. I really love the experience. And if you're looking for a fresh, kind of different romance that doesn't just feel like a bunch of strings of cliches, like I think it's definitely worth your time. It's called Ali and Ava. And then one that I watched for my movie club, which was actually my pick because I'll watch this whenever, is Amadeus, which is,
had you seen it before?
I've seen it like the first time I actually saw this was in 8th grade music class, because they showed this in music class, which is very interesting. Like obviously all the music is amazing, but like this deals with so many themes that an 8th grader cannot possibly comprehend or process the deep amount of, like, this film is so thematically dense trying to process this, because this isn't just like a standard biopic of Mozart. You have this just jealous and arrogant competitor Salieri, who like literally because of this movie and play is the only reason I feel like anybody in modern times knows who Salieri is. Tries to commit suicide at the beginning of the film, and he's old and decrepit and telling a priest the whole entire story about how he killed Mozart. And this is such an intriguing deconstruction of faith, about fate, and just listening to how F. Mary Abraham sells the dialogue that Salieri has in this film about his perceived purpose in life and how God smited him and turned him into a joke and just messed with him, and just the performances. Like, this film won 8 Oscars, and I feel like a lot of people might just look at this like, oh, this looks like it's just an Oscar bait. Like, no,
it's so deserved.
This is a whole other kind of thing. And you could, there's other musical biopics that definitely borrow a lot narratively. I was sitting there watching Elvis, and I'm like, well, the Colonel Salieri right here. And I was like, this is Amadeus, Baz Luhrmann edition. And let's be real here. Milos Forman is a better director than Baz Luhrmann is.
He's so good. I think he's made 2 of the best picture winners. Like if you really try and say what are the best, Cuckoo's Nest and Amadeus have to be like top 5, I think. And Man on the Moon is really good. I didn't love People versus Larry Flint, but it's got some things going for it.
Mm-hmm. And this had the unique situation of having two lead actors go up head to head with each other for best actor, and one of them actually won. Like, it didn't like split the vote or anything like that. And I think it's real easy because like F. Murray Abraham is such an amazing actor. I love him. And even the stuff that he does today, like him as Mr. Mustafa in Grand Budapest and narrating that film, oh, just his voice just so perfectly.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking about Amadeus, I was like, wow, I wonder how many times a movie has had him do that, like bookend narration, you know?
Because he's so great at it.
And they use his voice for Moon Knight, right?
Yes, he's Khonshu, and even in Mythic Quest on Apple TV Plus, where he is like this schlub of a Nebula winning writer who's apparently the writer for this video game, and he's so full of himself, and he's like, what's he gonna say to get canceled now? Because he's definitely a man from the 60s and 70s. He's just so great. And even his tiny role in Inside Llewyn Davis, where he listens to, like, Llewyn Davis just pours his soul out. He's like, it's good. Have you ever thought about getting a partner? And like, he's just, he plays that character so well, of somebody who's seen it all and really knows what's going to sell and isn't going to sugarcoat it for somebody. And just so wonderful. And then it's so weird because I remember watching this for the first time as an adult and being like, is that the guy from Animal House playing Mozart, Tom Holtz? Which, yeah, he's the main character in Animal House. And
his laugh. yeah, exactly.
And just like, he is so infectious and petulant child, and that's what makes it work so well. And he delivered a great performance in this. One of the best scenes in film is them writing the Requiem, and like, that's where Tom Holtz soars, because all the alcohol, all the horniness is just out the window in that scene, and that's just him in his most musical purity and the way he's going. And it's so fascinating how they incorporate the music. Just, it is a beautiful film. It is amazing. I don't think as long as I'm not actually handpicking directors on here, I don't think Milos Forman's ever going to wind up getting picked for Welcome to the Wasteland, but I would love to talk about Amadeus in depth with other people, because, and I am this Wednesday for my podcast for my movie club. I can't wait to talk about it because I just love this film. It's one of my top, I think it's in my top, when I finally did my top 50, it was like, I think low 30s. It's just really high up there for me. And it's one of those kinds of films that's stuck in the back of my mind and just grown over the years in terms of appreciation. I was kind of nervous showing this to my wife last night because I'm like, it's very hard to please her movie wise. And I'm like, please don't hate this.
Yeah. And it's long.
Well, and that's the thing. It does not feel like 20 minutes. And like, I haven't watched the director's cut. I haven't seen the 3-hour version of this, but this is such a great film. So if you haven't seen Amadeus, it is one of my favorite biopics because it transcends what people expect a biopic to be.
I think the director's cut is the only one I've seen, maybe. So I don't even know what the differences are. It's been a while. I've been meaning to rewatch it, actually. Also, the one scene that I always remember is when I might describe it wrong, but Salieri has a piece of music that he is trying to show off, and Jeffrey Jones, I think, plays it and just completely butchers it, and you just feel Salieri's pain right there. I mean, it feels so relatable. I can't think of anything in my life that even compares, really, but like, it just, I know that feeling of like your work or whatever being so wildly misinterpreted, you know?
Well, and that scene is so incredible too. And this will be the last thing I'm going to say about this, because I can just keep going on, is the Emperor butchers it.
Yeah.
But then Mozart comes in and improves it.
Yeah.
And then it's just like this. So first off, this guy butchers your music, and then this other genius walks in and it's like, yours is fine.
Yeah.
But, and he just goes to town and you're just like, like, I feel like Salieri's heart gets ripped out like 50 times in this movie. And there's certain things about him that are so hard for you to like feel like sympathize for him, but then there's so many things where you're just like, oh my god, I feel. It's just the last little bit here when he's reading Mozart's music and he just drops it, and his wife's like, "Is it not good?" He's like, "It's magnificent," and like it just bam, there it is. It's so great. But that's a wrap here on Welcome to the Wasteland. Foster, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks again.
And I didn't give you a chance earlier, so if you want to shamelessly plug here at the end, go right ahead.
Yeah, Letterboxd, FOSTH101.
And Foster will obviously be back on here again at some point in the future.
For Amistad, I think, right?
Yes, we got that. Well, honestly, I think that's coming up relatively quick too.
Yeah.
That's last week, filming probably last week of August. Or we'll figure that out because you'll be busy. Starting a new job. But thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.